Good morning, everyone, and a real honour to be here this morning. My name's Anthony Impey. I'm going to talk to you for 14 minutes, 47 seconds about... I said, where are the timers in the room? They said it was going to be smooth, and then there's like two big numbers behind you. So I will promise, if it's boring, it's only 14 minutes. That's all I'm saying. So, and I suppose, sorry, AV, am I okay walking away from here? I'm good, great. I've got thumbs up from the back. So I'm going to talk a bit about productivity. And I suppose, the challenge with productivity is, I think a lot of us think we know what productivity is, but then actually when we're asked to explain it, we kind of know what it is for us personally. When you have a productive day, you might have finished all your emails or had all your meetings, we kind of got a sense of productivity. But really what I'm going to focus on is business productivity and why it's so important to this agenda for skills. And I suppose, the thing about productivity is we're going to hear a lot about it over the next 6 weeks. Every day of the week for the next 6 weeks, we're going to hear about productivity and its importance on the UK economy. And so hopefully in the next few minutes, I will help explain why it's important and why it's so important to this agenda around skills. So my first question is, why should we care so much about productivity? And my starting point for this is to answer the question, what is productivity? And there are various ways that you can look at productivity. Here is a definition out of an economics textbook. Any economists in the house? One economist. Fiona, you recognise this? Is this good? Excellent. So one person in the room is good on this definition. I'm not sure about it myself. The next one is this equation. This is how you calculate productivity. Total output divided by total input gives you your productivity number. I speak to lots of business leaders every single day as part of my job at Be The Business. And nobody is using this calculation. So, and then this quotation from the Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman, who said, "Productivity isn't everything, but it's almost everything." And I suppose it's to that point that we need to think about, because actually, when you think about productivity, it is the thing that drives everything within our economy, and is a key driver to sort of social change and social impact. And I suppose, when I look at these three statements, I think it's just important to recognise that for a business, productivity is just some very simple things. And increasing productivity is just some very simple things. It's about delivering the same service with fewer people, one example of it, or it's to complete a project faster with the same resources. It could be to charge the same price for something but using fewer materials. So it is about, the work that you produce using fewer resources. And the thing is in the UK, our productivity growth was going so well up until 2008. And in fact, we were growing, our productivity growth in the UK was at 2.3% per annum. We were the fastest growing nation in the G7 group than any of our peers. We were absolutely trailblazing. And then 2008, financial crisis, and from that point onwards, we've been sort of pretty much flatlining in terms of productivity growth. In a good year, we'll have about 0.5% productivity growth, and it's sort of dipped below that since. So we were doing well before, since 2008. Essentially been flatlining. And I suppose that leads to the question, why should we care? What does it mean for each and every one of us? And so for our businesses in the UK, it means that we're less competitive. We're less competitive with our international peers. We're less competitive domestically because we're not performing as well as others. But actually, it also has this dramatic impact on wider society. And in fact, there was some research completed last year by the Resolution Foundation that found that average salaries in the UK would have been £11,000 higher today if we'd continued on that growth of productivity since 2008. So that 2.3% growth that I spoke about that we had in the UK, if that had continued from 2008 to today, each and every one of us would be £11,000 better off. And in the context of a cost of living crisis, that's a lot of money. In fact, we wouldn't have a cost of living crisis if productivity had remained at that level. So this issue of productivity is not just about making businesses more profitable, and that is one consequence. But the knock-on effect of that is that salaries increase, tax receipts increase, the delivery of public services is much easier because government have money to do that. So this issue of productivity is not just an economic one, but very much a social issue. So I'm going to move us to sort of the big question, which is why is productivity so important now? And I'm going to answer this in two slides. One has an equation on it, the other has a graph on it. I apologise in advance. So the first is the equation. And so if you look at the profitability of the firm, it's made up of various things. And so you'll recognise this profitability is the customer price less the cost of the materials, less the cost that you spend on people, and that gives you profitability. But the other component that's really important to this is productivity, because productivity enables you to get more from your material costs and get more from your labour costs. So this is a direct driver to profitability, really important starting point. The other is to just look at how productivity has changed and the nature of productivity over the last few years. So in the past, sales prices and cost prices pretty much tracked side by side. And then recently, over the last sort of few years, we've seen multiple lockdowns in the economy. We've seen a war in Ukraine. We have got disrupted supply chains. At one point, we had an oil tanker, or say a container ship, blocking the Suez Canal. You know, all these things created massive, massive disruption. And you saw big increase in costs for us as consumers of all sorts of goods, and of course driven by this massive, very sharp increase in costs. Now, what's interesting, an example of this is I was talking to a construction company, and they're in the process of putting up a building in central Manchester, and they got to the person ordering all the steel work for this building. It was a tall building, lots of steel work. He was going to put the order in on the Friday afternoon. It got to about 4 o'clock, and like most of us on 4 o'clock on a Friday evening, you kind of think, oh, this can wait until Monday. It's just a little bit too difficult for my brain to process. This is me anyway. And so this person didn't order the steelwork. They left it until the Monday morning. Monday morning, the steelwork had gone up by 20% in price. So you can kind of imagine, you're talking about an industry that works on maybe 1 or 2% margins. That is the kind of issue that businesses have had to contend with for the last few years. The good news is it's stable now, but the difference between your cost price and the sale price has become much, much, much smaller. And so for businesses now, this issue of productivity is the key issue that they are considering. So I just want to kind of talk a little bit about what is holding back? What is the cause for our poor productivity performance? And I'm going to talk about a piece of research that we did. This QR code will take you to the report. This is a report that we published last year. It's based on a survey that we do called the Productive Business Index. It's the largest survey of its type. We've got over 1 million data points about small business productivity. And this told us something very, very interesting. It said, what we did was we measured the gap between how confident a business leader was, a small business leader, and the corresponding action that they took. So we looked at, how good do you think you are at productivity? And then what are you doing about it? So the confidence and your action. And so we measured confidence. We had the action, and then the difference between the two was the gap. So that's the nature of the calculation that we did. And then we did this survey across all the countries in the G7. So the UK, America, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Japan. And this is what we came up with. So this is the ranking on confidence. You can see here sort of a fairly, save for Japan, which is a bit of an outlier, you've got all business leaders across all G7 countries sort of fairly closely aligned in terms of their confidence levels. Then we looked at the action that these same business leaders were taking. And then you start seeing a lot more variation. And it's only when you start seeing the gap between the two. We talked, Shelley talked about gaps earlier on. Here is a very stark gap around productivity. So here you see the gap between the confidence that business leaders have and the action that they take. And you can see here sort of France, very small gap. Japan, again, a bit of an outlier, so I'm not going to concentrate so much on that. But you can see here, UK, 24% gap between how good we think we are and the corresponding action that we take. And it's this gap that is so important to the UK's productivity issue. Thing to note is the US, similar size gap. So you can say, well, the US aren't all that. Now, when you look at the G7 productivity table, sorry, Shelley. But when you look at the G7 productivity, when you look at the productivity in the G7, the US is right up there in terms of the most productive nation. Trailblazing ahead, France, Germany just behind the US. And the thing is that actually they're starting at a much higher confidence level. So, the gap might be the same, but the corresponding action, the thing that actually drives their productivity is therefore much higher. So you can see that as an articulation, a clear representation of why UK productivity is so far behind. We just think we're better than we are. Now, US, much better than us. Shelley. But understanding the productivity problem as a confidence action gap is really, really helpful. Now, I'm going to share some data about skills and how this translates to skills. Again, another report that we published, this one much more recent. We published this in March this year. And again, it is a version of our Productive Business Index looking at firms in the UK. And this kind of really brings home that gap between confidence and action. And so you can see here on leadership and management skills, management teams believe their management team has the right blend of professional management skills, but about half of that number plan to increase activity to improve their general management skills. So real confidence, half the level of action or activity. Digital skills the same, really interesting proportions again. Really confident employees have the digital skills they need. Half the number plan to increase training around digital skills. Team skills, again, sort of similar level proportions. Believe the business has the skills and the talent they need, but no, very sort of nearly half of them, more than half of them, only plan to increase training and development around team skills in the next 12 months. So this gap, you can see, having a real impact on the skills that we train. And I suppose this sort of leads me to just sort of share my thoughts on what we need to do in response to this. And I think there are three things. I think the first is, we do have world-class organisations within the UK, as represented by World Skills UK, doing an amazing job showcasing those skills. And a lot of those businesses are larger employers. They're the larger businesses, very often because they have more resources than smaller businesses. And there is a really important opportunity to connect that skill set within bigger business with those smaller businesses. We, in fact, at Be the Business, we run a program called the Inspiring Leaders Program that does exactly that, sharing that expertise that larger businesses have with smaller businesses. So that's my first steer. The second is to really demonstrate that world-class skills are not something that's exclusive or unreachable for all but the very largest organisations. And actually, world-class skills is something that all businesses can aspire to. And then finally, I think it's really important that we make it easy to access the resources and the provision that can drive world-class skills. That's not to say that we need to make world-class skills easy. Like, world-class skills are difficult, but we need to make access to those resources easy. We need to help small businesses sort of navigate through a skills system so they can access the system and get the very best from that system. Because I think if we do those three things, if we connect big businesses with small, I think if we can demonstrate that world class is something that's accessible. And I think if we can make it easy for small businesses to engage, we can make some really big steps to closing that gap between what small businesses think they're capable of and what they actually do. Thank you very much.